this session is being recorded and we will make it available after the event. So just keep that in mind. During the session, this is a conversation, this is an open conversation, so feel free to use the chat to participate, to ask your questions. We will start with a short introduction by the speakers. They will introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do. The spirit of this series is to introduce careers in the language industries. Basically, we want to showcase what people can do with languages and why we think there are opportunities in working with languages in a globalized context. We have people with very different profiles. We're very happy to be able to showcase these interesting profiles today. So we have 4 people joining us: Naomi Porter, Sarah Boyer, Roland Molt, and Becca Narula are joining us today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, although my computer is doing crazy stuff. Let's see if this works. And then we can start with Naomi, if you want to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, and thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So hello everybody, my name is Naomi Porter. I translate from French into English. I lived in France for almost 10 years, where I worked in the tourism sector. And I recently moved back to the UK to study for a MA in Translation Studies at the University of Nottingham. So I graduated in December 2019, and since then I have 2 main activities. So the first of which is I'm an academic support worker. So I provide transcription, proofreading and note-taking for university students with disabilities. And the rest of my time is dedicated to raising my profile as a graduate / professional linguist and emerging freelance translator. I've been a really active member of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting since I was a student, and last year I won the ITI Best Academic Research Award for my dissertation on song translation. My areas of expertise are seasonal tourism. So when I lived in France, I lived in the Alps, so winter tourism. And my other area of expertise is I have a BA in visual communication, so the arts, illustration, fine art history, and design. And I hope to bring these 2 areas of expertise into future translation specialisms. It has been a bit of a rocky road for me since my graduation in terms of paid translation success, but I'm sure that today I can give students here some really good advice on how to raise your profile and how to make yourself really visible as graduates in the translation industry. So I look forward to answering your questions today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Naomi. Now, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah Bowyer, and I'm really pleased to be talking to you today, albeit from a distance. I'm here at home in Cheshire in the northwest of England, so not that far from Aston, but I appreciate that people will be dialing in from possibly all over the world, which is one of the advantages of being able to meet up virtually, I guess. So I'm a freelance translator as well. I work from French and Spanish into English. And I'm also a qualified lawyer. So a bit of background about me. I haven't always been a translator. I changed career relatively recently. I set up as a translator at the end of 2018. Although I started off as a student when I was 18, I went to study languages. I studied Spanish and French. As part of that, I went to live in Paris and Barcelona. And then after my degree, I spent a year teaching English in a very remote region of Switzerland whilst I kind of figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, although it hasn't turned out that way. So I ended up taking a postgraduate degree in law, and I spent around 10 years working as a lawyer at large international firms in London and Brussels. But after all that time, I decided that it was time for a change. And so I thought about lots of options, and I decided that I really wanted to move into translation. And I thought that would tie in well with my passion for languages and my experience in law and some other interests too. I thought it was really time to make my work about something I really enjoyed. So these days, logically, I specialise in legal translation, and I also do a lot of work in sports and sports law translation, especially football, because I'm a big football fan. And actually on that side, I've been lucky enough to do quite a lot of work with Ronan, who you'll hear from shortly. So I'm really glad to see him here too. I suppose to give you a sense of what an average day is like, today's been a fairly average day. I've been working on some submissions in a court case about insurance this morning. I had a little break to attend a training webinar. And then this afternoon, I've been working for a football federation, translating some coaching presentations. So it's been quite a mixed bag before coming to speak to you. And I think I might finish work early once I've done this. I guess some highlights for me have been working on high-profile legal cases. So one of my very first jobs, which was quite intimidating, was some translation for the Catalonia independence leaders trial in the Spanish Supreme Court, which was a really interesting case and quite a baptism of fire to start with something so high-profile. And also really big sporting events like the Women's World Cup and the Champions League and the forthcoming Olympics in Paris. And the other big highlight for me was winning the Best Newcomer Award from the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. And that was lovely to get some recognition because it can be quite lonely at the start of the career journey and you don't know whether you're doing things right. And it was good to get some recognition that I was making a good start and doing at least some of the right things. So I hope I can pass on some of those experiences to you today so that you can start on a good footing. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about this because I'm so glad I made the decision to change careers, and I hope it will make a really rewarding career for lots of you too.
Very good. Thank you for that. A very interesting combination of law and languages here. So thank you for sharing that experience and football for sure, which I think many in the audience are fans as well. So thank you for that. Now let's go to Ronan. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks very much. Firstly, thank you for the invitation, and yeah, it's a pleasure. As the other panelists have mentioned, it's a real pleasure to be here and sharing in this discussion today. So yeah, in terms of my profile, I'm a translator and interpreter and work in French and Spanish into English. And my specialist area, as Sarah kindly mentioned, is football actually. So in terms of my background, I initially studied, sort of really enjoyed languages at school, and initially studied a BA in modern languages, French and Spanish, at Durham, and had a really enjoyable 4 years there. Well, I said 4 years, sort of obviously a year abroad in the third year, which was split between France and Spain. And then upon sort of finishing my degree, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And perhaps sort of ended up working in a project management role in the translation industry. So that's actually proved to be that's given me, I think, now a really good sort of foundation now that I'm sort of on the other side, as it were, as a freelancer. So after being in the project management role for a little while, I then went, as Sarah I believe did, went to teach English and spent a period of time in Spain with the idea of sort of improving really my level of Spanish. And then after doing that for a while, I decided I wanted to come back to the UK, and I did the 1-year course in MA Interpreting at London Metropolitan. That was back in 2014. And then since then, I've sort of been translating and interpreting on a freelance basis, and sort of primarily really in the world of football. So that brings me nicely onto football, which has really been a passion of mine right since a young age. So I've sort of been both a football player, supporter, and also in my free time, sort of in my sort of childhood, I suppose, I often wrote match reports and articles and things, often on a voluntary basis, obviously. So really what I was keen to do was try to marry and combine those two passions of mine. On the one hand, the languages, and the other, this passion for football. And fortunately, there was obviously this need within, certainly within British football. I believe indeed it was back in 1999 when Chelsea became the first team to actually field 11 foreign players of 9 different nationalities. So clearly there is a demand there within this international game that we all love, or rather many of us love. So in terms of my sort of professional experience and some of the settings that I've worked in, quite a varied range of settings, really. I mean, on the interpreting side, perhaps the most sort of high-profile setting would be the typical sort of football press conference. I've also worked as well in contexts including the flash interviews, which take place immediately after games are finished. I've done work for the radio as well. I've also done interviews that have been used in match day programs. I've also interpreted fans forum events, and also actually done some medical appointments, which obviously raises all sorts of issues about lots of issues really, so in terms of confidentiality and also expertise in a medical area, which prior to working in football, I didn't really have any sort of experience of. I've also sort of attended house viewings with players, which was more sort of perhaps this role that's definitely in fashion now, of this player liaison role within the sort of the player care side of football, looking at footballers' well-being and things, in order to really allow them to really concentrate on-field matters. So as you can see, a range of different contexts there. So it's certainly a varied sort of professional life, really, I'd say. In terms of the translation side, you know, as you can imagine, there are lots of different places. Obviously, with the rise of the internet, the football clubs tend to translate, foreign football clubs, in my case, French and Spanish speaking clubs, tend to translate their web content into English. Of course, press releases. I've also done some work for the football club's museums, which are also translated into English, and very much sort of at the moment, which is quite an interesting aspect of the work, is social media. So been some quite high profile cases recently where obviously football players aren't necessarily the ones who are tweeting out and things like that. It's rather communications agencies and things. So I'm involved in some of that work as well. So yeah, that hopefully gives you a bit of an overview of some of my professional experience, some of the settings that I've worked in, and yeah, in terms of what I'd really take away from sort of all of this, or highlight really, would be the importance of specialisation. I mean, the 2 previous colleagues have mentioned specialisation, and obviously they've also highlighted the fact that they're working in areas that are of sort of personal or professional interest to them. So again, that's something that I'd really promote. I mean, I recognise that not everyone loves football, but I think that a lot of things that we could say, sort of in terms of my specialisation, would easily apply to other specialisations. So yeah, so that's all for me. I look forward to answering your questions and yeah, sharing in the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Ronan. We can see some of the topics already emerging quite naturally, specialization, but also the diversity that you have even inside your specialization. So that's all very good. Now let's go to Reka to finish the round of introductions, and then we can start with the questions. You're muted, Reka. Sorry.
I thought I'd unmuted myself. I must have remuted it. So thank you, David. And thank you, everybody, as well, for coming here. I can see there's rather a lot of you, over 200 participants, attendees here today. So it's going to be a pleasure to explain my role and share my experience and my knowledge with all of you, and hopefully answer your questions. So I am principally an interpreter. and to a lesser extent a translator. I do business, conference and public service interpreting. I'm trilingual in English, French and Mauritian Creole, and fluent in Spanish. My first degree was in modern languages, so French, Spanish and German. I do not use German. I'd probably get the wrong person arrested or sent to prison, or when they be totally innocent. I've been interpreting officially for almost, we can say 20 years. And I work principally in the areas of law, medicine, local government, immigration, and other areas of specialization such as forestry, what they call international forestry governance, biodiversity, and nuclear, the nuclear field, which is a very, very specialized field, as are all the others in which I work. And in terms of doing the public service interpreting, I also have diplomas in public service interpreting, the DPSI, the Diploma in Public Service Interpreting, that's what DPSI stands for. And there are 3 subject specializations or options, and I have a DPSI in law and 1 in health. And in terms of my career path, although I said I've been officially interpreting for the last 20 years, I got my first taste of interpreting when I was 14. It was official. You might say it's child labor. Ironically, it was for a branch of the United Nations. Up to that point, I wanted to do medicine. I wanted to be a doctor. But then I realized maybe my calling is more to do with interpreting. I fell into that job not by mistake, but by chance. I was standing in the right corridor at the right time for the people. They were looking for an extra interpreter, and I was it. And it was for some delegates who had come from different Francophone countries and were visiting the town I was living in at the time in India, and it was to do with small and medium-sized enterprises. So that was my introduction to interpreting at the tender age of 14. And from that time, that was my career choice, my career ambition, and I'm very glad to say I fulfilled that. As I think Sarah mentioned, and maybe also so did Naomi and Ronan, I'm a member of professional organizations such as the APCI, which is the Association of Police and Court Interpreters, the CIOL, which is the Chartered Institute of Linguists, and the ITI, the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. Overkill? I don't think so, because each one offers a different focus, if you will, although there is a certain amount of overlap between the CIOL and the ITI. And I'm also on what they call a registrant on the National Register of Public Service Interpreters. By the way, since last year, quite a bit of my work has been through Microsoft Teams. So I'm using one of the platforms that I use for interpreting rather, which has its ups and downs sometimes, as my colleagues who were here earlier on know all too well, the issues I had with connecting. But anyway, one thing I say when I present my work elsewhere as an interpreter is, and this is something I think Ronan mentioned just now, is that choose a topic, choose an area that you like already. You might then find other areas you gel with or that you come to like, but your initial sort of foray into interpreting or translation, find something that you like to do, that you're interested in. So in Ronan's case, for example, it was football. And the other thing I would like to say, coupled with that, is from a personal perspective, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, you cannot do 50-50 interpreting and translation. One will have more focus than the other, and you will know whether you're better or you prefer interpreting or whether you prefer translating. in my case, I like both, but it just so happened that the way my career progressed is that I do much more interpreting work than I do translation. I'd say either 70-30 or 80-20, depending on, you know, what the market requires on that day. And as with, I think, my other colleagues here who are present, who are on the panel, no day is like another. And that's what keeps you interested, keeps me interested in the job, not just because it's something I've wanted to do since I was 14. So I have a variety of assignments. I can be doing a child case conference for social services in the morning, and maybe going to a medical appointment in the afternoon, going to a police station, doing a court case. It could be a one-off court case at magistrates, or it could be a trial, sometimes prison, going to prison, or going to the probation service. And so yes, my working languages are English, French, Spanish, and Mauritian Creole. I have lived and worked, although I'm not from the UK, I have also lived and worked in other countries. I grew up in yet another country, apart from, and have lived also in India, but I've lived and worked in the European sector in France, Spain, Italy, as well as other EU countries. These are just three that I can kind of name. And the nature of my translating work can be something like translating birth certificates, wedding certificates, or medical legal reports. So as I said, one day does not resemble another. And that's what keeps you on your toes, and that's what keeps me interested. And I think that's all from me for now. I hope to be able to answer your questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. It's definitely a very good introduction now. We can see very different profiles, but also some similar aspects, combining your interests and how you can mix and combine your languages, your interest in languages and your interest in other areas to make a living. So to start the conversation, remember that this is focused mostly to young professionals, new graduates, recent graduates who want to start in the field. So what do you think is the best avenue to start off? How do you set up your brand? How do you approach clients? What are those recommendations that you can share with the audience now? Naomi, would you like to start with this?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I've got a few little things to say. I'd say from my perspective, one of the key things that I did to raise my profile and to start out in the industry was to join a professional body. So I joined the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. You don't have to join the ITI. You can also join the Chartered Institute of Linguists. That's another, as Riza was saying, there is a crossover there. And you don't have to wait until you graduate to be a member. You can be a student member of the ITI. And this is just really, really, for me, it's really, really vital, because it shows potential clients and it shows your colleagues that you are adhering to a professional standard of the industry. So the ITI, they have a code of conduct and their professional standards that all of their members have to adhere to. So by saying that you are a member, you're automatically saying that you're very serious about becoming a translator or an interpreter, and you are absolutely ready to give your best service. So that was a really, really important step for me to join the ITI. And from that, you can also join the local groups. I've joined my regional translators group, the East Midlands regional group, and you can also join the specialist groups of the ITI. So I'm also a member of the Media, Arts and Tourism Network, and also the French Network. So all of these little affiliations, they just give you so many different opportunities to go to events, to volunteer, to connect with people. And I'd say that's one of the most important things that you can do as an emerging translator or interpreter, is to definitely join a professional body, because the opportunities are absolutely very valuable. don't know if anybody else wants to chip in on that.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree, and that was one of the main things that I was going to suggest as well. I think one thing that really surprised me when I was starting out, and when I've been looking at where my work comes from, is how much work has come to me through knowing other translators rather than through marketing myself. I think I was quite naive when I started and thought I would have a website and then people would somehow know I was there and go to my website and ask me to do work, but it didn't happen that way. And actually it was more about getting to know people in the profession, working together with them. Some of my first jobs were with other legal translators. So I would do some translation and they would review it, for example. And the other good thing about professional bodies as well is that they can run mentoring arrangements. So you could kind of look through their directories and approach people to set up some kind of informal mentoring, or there's schemes in the different networks so that you could have a more formal program. So, for example, I'm in the French network of the ITI, and we have a business mentoring program. So I match people up with more experienced translators, and they work together for 6 months on certain business goals that they have to help them get started. Or there's schemes where you can do translation mentoring, so that you meet up with your mentor kind of once a month or once every couple of months and look at a short text together and talk it through to kind of gauge your level and see where things are going. And I think that's actually a really good way for relationships to develop organically, and you might end up working together in the future. So yeah, I would also emphasize the value of collaborating with other professionals.
Definitely.
That's very interesting. That sorry, that relates to something.
I just wanted to add like one small thing. In fact, I would say that it's thanks to my my membership with the ITI that I've become so involved with the translation industry. I've had 2 mentors, which was wonderful, which came from my membership with the local group. I've been able to write up articles in the ITI bulletin, so I've had some articles published. I've been to the ITI conference and met lots of different people. It's just a very, very valuable, and lots of opportunities have come my way because of that, and that's really built up my visibility of my profile since I graduated. So definitely bear it in mind. And the membership for students is very reasonable price for the ITI. I think it's £49 for the year, which is not too bad, I think, considering everything you get out of it.
That is very good. I think that directly addresses one of the questions about how you market yourself at the beginning, and you're highlighting the networking in the profession internally as a way of supporting each other. I don't know if Reka or yes?
I was going to agree with both Naomi and Sarah, but also add that, excuse me, apart from the ITI, there is the Chartered Institute, which is a parallel organization to the ITI. Like the ITI, they also have network groups, regional groups, specialist groups. So, for example, for language groups, but also specialist subject groups. The ITI, does run a course which some of the participants here might find interesting, is SWATI, SWATI, which is starting work as a translator and interpreter. Although this was introduced fairly recently, I've been a member of the ITI for over 15 years. I know people who have done it and who have found it beneficial. So for me, I would, on top of registering as a student or as an associate, either with the CIOL, or I would also consider doing that particular training event, which I know people have found beneficial. I just saw somebody put a question saying, what's the difference between an interpreter and translator? Well, a translator will deal with written documents and an interpreter deals with the spoken word. That's the basic difference. And I would really emphasize that you will know yourself. You know yourself best. So you will know whether you're better with written work written documents or the spoken language. But anyway, this is just a question just came up on my screen, so I thought I'd answer it as well.
Absolutely fine. Thank you very much for that. Sarah, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm actually a tutor on one of those courses from the ITI, the starting out course. So if people do have questions about that or are thinking about joining, I did it when I was starting out a few years ago, and I thought it was great. So I don't know what it will be like because it's my first time as a tutor this time around. I hope it will still be good. But if you're interested in that, please do email me and ask questions if that's something of interest.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Ronan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I just really echo what all of the things that all of the other panelists have mentioned with regards to networking, and similarly to Sarah mentioned, sort of I look back at my current clients, and really all of them have come through sort of online networking that I've done, particularly sort of the power of LinkedIn, which is perhaps something that we might come on to discuss in greater detail. And I'd also, in my particular case, I'd also like to mention as well the value really of sort of pro bono translations. So, I mean, it may not be necessarily for everyone, and it may seem unfair that, you know, after having studied perhaps a degree and a master's and things, that really from day one you don't necessarily, you aren't going to necessarily have massive opportunities to be paid for your work. So in my case, looking to sort of establish a name for myself in the world of football, I decided just to do some sort of some voluntary translation really, and that enabled me to then build up a portfolio to then be able to approach people who were commissioning paid work to be able to say, you know, I've got these qualifications and I've also got some professional, you know, experience in this particular specialization. So I think, yeah, that would definitely be something that I would recommend. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I think we can connect that to some of the questions in the chat about what recommendations would you give to language students who are not sure about the career in translation to start, how can they start early on? And there was another one. Let me just, what advice would you give to language students who are about to graduate but are not sure about what they would like to pursue with their language skills? So how can you try that? I think volunteering is a very good option, but I don't know what. Yes, Rekha, do you want to?
Yes, so carrying on the idea from what Ronan has just said, there is an organization called Translators Without Borders. And I know some people do, and you know, you kind of add to their translation their documents that they sort of have online, and it's done pro bono on a voluntary basis, but at least that way you can build up some experience, not just experience, but then you also you can get an insight and knowledge of certain areas you might like to specialize in. So it's a kind of, if you know Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, so this is Translators Without Borders.
Perfect, thank you very much for that. Very good recommendation. Naomi?
Yeah, I just wanted to give my take on voluntary translation. I was also advised to try and find some pro bono translation opportunities. This is easier said than done, in my experience, especially with Translators Without Borders. It's a wonderful concept and I completely agree with it, but the opportunities to translate, especially if your language combination is a very, very common one, such as mine, French into English, it's not as easy as it sounds to even get voluntary translation work. So it's an interesting avenue to look at. I made several profiles to be a volunteer translator, and I've never had any work from any of them. So Translators Without Borders. There's another one as well. I can't quite remember the name. A few different companies, and I've never been able to get any work from them. So it's very, very competitive, even to have voluntary translation opportunities. I just thought I'd just give that a different perspective in there.
Very good and it's very good that you mentioned that there's actually a question specifically about voluntary translation opportunities that might be too daunting for beginners with tight deadlines. Do you have any recommendation for that, how to tackle those? Yes, Rebecca?
No, I didn't hear what you just said, David.
Oh, sorry, I was saying that just connected to what Naomi said about the volunteering opportunities, that they might be too daunting for students. And then what advice do you give to the students who are trying to get this experience, but then it's a competitive environment with tight deadlines and high demands as well? Any recommendations?
There are two things I would say. One is to go back and repeat what my fellow panel members have said, which is join one or both of the main membership professional associations, and that way you will get known, because within those organizations are the subgroups, regional, language, subject specialization. But also, I've been seeing lately on LinkedIn and other platforms that how shall I put this without sounding negative? Agencies are asking people to do free translations for them. And colleagues are posting and saying this is another way of being exploited as far as they're concerned. I'm not saying this is my experience, but just to be a bit aware of any agency that might approach you and say, can you do half a page or 2 pages or 10 pages for free? That is probably not the way to do pro bono work, I would suggest, but that's my perspective. And I'm not speaking for my fellow panel members.
It's very good that you mentioned that. I think ethics has been an issue that has been raised in the discussion. It's normally not tackled head on, but it's definitely, it emerges in the discussions here and there. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. So very good recommendation. Something that has been mentioned in the chat as well is training. What do you think? Is it necessary to have a degree in translation, or what are the benefits of a degree in translation or interpreting, or how do you make up for it if you don't have one? Any recommendations?
Well, if I may just, for me,
yeah, sure.
Having a qualification related to what you're going to do in your profession, whether it's as a translator or an interpreter, is vital. Would you expect a doctor not to have a degree in medicine to practice? Or, would you expect the doctor just to have an A level in biology or in chemistry? No, you would expect that person to be qualified. We are no less professionals than the medical professionals, or a lawyer, a solicitor, or a barrister. So that is how you must consider yourself, and that is the mindset you must have. You are a professional, and in order to be a professional, you need to have the relevant qualification, whether it's a master's in whether it's a master's in translation, whether it's a diploma in public service interpreting, or even whether it's a degree in languages or linguistics, something related to the field in which you're going to work. That for me is, yes, that goes without saying as far as I'm concerned.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Rebecca. Sarah, do you want? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a translation master's, so maybe I can talk from a different perspective. I think, we've spoken a lot about the value of specialising, and so for me and for my clients, I think they really value my experience and background coming from another career and having specialist knowledge of my particular area. So they're more interested in whether I have the qualifications to translate legal documents specifically, rather than whether I have a general qualification to translate. I think they take language skills as a given, and then they look at your background in your particular specialism. So a lot of useful training for translators can be to actually go to the specialist bodies of the areas that you translate in. So for me, it would be, I don't know, the Law Society or particular law firms offer lots of great webinars. And on the football side, I've been doing a football law, well, there's a football law conference coming up in a couple of weeks that I'll be attending. So that's an area that you need to think about as well when you're when you're deciding where you want to specialise, because you're going to have to spend quite a lot of time immersed in that world and learning about it. So you really need to be interested in it and passionate about it and also committed to keeping up to date and doing that side of the training as well.
Very good. Thank you for mentioning training not only in the translation, and interpreting, but also in your specialization. Ronan, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to sort of add to those comments, and particularly sort of thinking about my own experiences and particularly interpreting. So I studied an MA in interpreting, and I think just my own personal experience would be that because there's obviously techniques involved. I mean, both for simultaneous and consecutive interpreting, which is the sort of the two main modes really of interpreting, and I think that really, had I not done the course, I definitely wouldn't have had the confidence to then be able to go and sort of do the job professionally, I think. So in terms of setting me up sort of for a professional career, I think that's in my case anyway, that did certainly help. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much about that. And now, one of the tricky issues that we normally have and discuss with students is rates. How do you define your rate, and how do you go about defining a rate for the agencies and for the end client? What differences are there? And that was in the chat as well. So what do you think about that? Any recommendations, especially for new starters?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah,
it's a really tricky one, and I'm not sure. It's always evolving, and I think that I could do better on this now, and I'm constantly rethinking how I approach this sort of stuff. So I suppose my first piece of advice is, don't think you have to have everything figured out all at the beginning. You kind of find your way as you go along, and that's okay, that's fine, and you can talk to other people about it, and there's always people like us and people in associations that are happy to talk things through as well. So I guess when I was first starting out, I had absolutely no idea how to set rates, and so I started off by thinking about how much money I actually needed, and then kind of working backwards and reverse engineering from there, thinking about how long I was going to spend working. And although I suppose it's quite common in translation to quote by source words, so you say X amount per 1,000 source words or something like that, I try to think about it as, even if it's just in my own head or behind the scenes, as how much am I going to make per hour? And so that really helps me. And as you get more experienced, you get more of a sense of how long things will take. There are always going to be jobs that, and it happens to me quite often, where there's something that takes far longer than you thought. And I think it's just part of the job. And I'm hoping that you get better with that in time. But generally speaking, you can say, I get a contract sent to me that's fairly standard. I know that's going to take me maybe an afternoon or something like that, so I can think about it in terms of hours. For agencies, my rate is slightly cheaper. It's quite a bit cheaper if they're going to do, they're offering me things of value, because they're going to find the clients for me. They are going to do, hopefully they're going to revise my work when I send it back, and hopefully they're also going to give me feedback, which I think is really valuable to me. So on that basis, if they're dealing with the end clients as well, that's good for me, and it saves me a lot of time so that I can focus on just the translation. So they're offering me things that are worth something. And obviously for direct clients, I have to price that into my own price, because I have to do all of that. And I tend to need to explain the process more, to have more calls with them, to work through different questions. I happen to enjoy that. I quite like a mixture of both. But I think you can, I think you start to get a feel for it, and you can look at, there's different rate surveys as well out there. I don't know how reliable it is, because I think they take statistics from people working all over the world, so you have to factor in living costs and things like that. So there's a lot of variations, but there are things. I think there was an inbox translation survey done at the end of last year that has some information out there on rates. There was something on pros.com. I think some of the big associations have done surveys. Use them with caution, but at least they give you a bit of a starting point to see kind of a few bands of what might be reasonable. But also know your worth and don't get negotiated down to something you don't feel is
Very useful
appropriate.
recommendations. It's a very complex but nuanced topic at the same time, and you have provided a lot of information on that. Rekha, Ronan, I don't know who was first. You wanted to chip in?
No, first.
Oh, Ronan, sorry.
First.
Ronan?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I thought someone else was going first. No, it's fine. Echo really a lot of what Sarah said, that when you're initially starting it out, it is quite challenging. I sort of recall initially sort of looking on the internet, trying to find sort of ideas in terms of rates, but that was sort of slightly frustrated just because there was nowhere really that said, you should be charging this much. Nothing is set in stone really. So I think, as Sarah mentioned, that it's perhaps a good idea to sort of seek help really, or maybe seek some sort of advice, on this kind of issue. As Sarah mentions, really the importance of setting yourself an hourly rate, really, of perhaps even potentially, if you're in a position not to necessarily accept all jobs, perhaps, to potentially turn jobs down if they're not meeting your hourly rate. And something, that Sarah touched on in terms of the living costs. For example, I have some clients in Spain where potentially in Spain compared to the UK, perhaps the living cost isn't as high. So therefore, with Spanish clients, I perhaps can't necessarily command the same sort of rates as I would be able to with perhaps UK-based clients, for example. Again, sort of returning back to the idea of specialisation. I think it's important to value that if you're going to specialise in a field, that you are a specialist in that field, and therefore your specialist knowledge should command its price, really. I think I'd say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There are two questions I think from the chat that I would like to address before we finish. So one is, what other tasks apart from traditional translation and interpreting jobs you do? This will partially be covered in the other sessions, but if there's anything you do on top of your regular translation jobs, I think that would be super interesting for the audience. And the second one is the effects of COVID, because we all need to talk about COVID, obviously, because it's shaking the industries. So those two questions to finish, I think, would be a nice way to round up the presentation. So any takers on any of these ones? Rebecca?
Can you just explain that first part of the question? Any other jobs we do apart from interpreting and translating? Sorry, maybe I'm a bit thick and
apart from the traditional definition of interpreting and translation, for instance, Cronan at the beginning was talking about accompanying his clients for doctor's appointments, which is interpreting, but it's a very specific form of interpreting. Naomi mentioned academic writing, I think, yeah. So these other tasks that you do to complement your professional portfolio.
Right. Okay.
If you do them.
Proofreading is a big.
Not now.
It's a big part of it.
Okay, Naomi, proofreading, yes.
Yeah, I'd say one of the main skills that they don't mention when you're doing your translation degree is how much proofreading and reviewing that is a huge part of the job. In fact, that's mostly the things that I'm doing at the moment in the translation industry. I review and I proofread my colleagues' translations, which is great experience for me. So it's a really, really vital skill, and it's something that you will be expected to do and that will be part and parcel of the translation process. And that's something that I wasn't aware of when I started out in the industry. And it's a really good idea to start improving your skills in proofreading. One of the things I just did like a really basic LinkedIn introduction course into proofreading, just to get my head around it. And then you just try and pick up as many little reviewing or proofreading jobs as you can, and that can also snowball into translation work. So that's a really important skill.
Perfect.
Can I
Thank
just
you very much.
I'd just like to add on from what Naomi has just said, is that proofreading/revising, but if you find yourself retranslating everything, you have to stop, because then it becomes another translation. So just be wary of that, because sometimes when you're asked to proofread or revise a text, if it's not up to scratch, you find yourself doing the translation all over again. So you have to then go back to your client and say, no, this now requires another translation. What I do, apart from revising or proofreading, is I also do transcription work. So you listen to video or audio recordings, and that can be very time consuming. And it's basically 3 different skills that you're doing in that one assignment. You're listening, you're transcribing, and then you're translating. And each one is built sort of separately. Some people do it as a global charge, but yeah, transcription and translation is another one. And I did a couple not that long ago, actually 2-3 weeks ago. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sarah.
I was going to mention audio transcription as well. I think people are being more creative about how they present content, and so there's a lot more videos and audio files out there, and in a legal context as well. One of my biggest jobs this year was translating and transcribing an arbitration in Peru, from Peru. I wasn't in Peru, sadly, and so that does require an extra set of skills, but it also is really good variety as well in your work, and you learn a lot of helpful things that you can take forward and make you more marketable in the future.
Perfect. Great idea. Thank you very much. And Ronan?
Yeah, sure. One of the other areas of my work, it's actually a client that Sarah and I sort of both work on, actually, would be sort of subtitling. So obviously I mentioned before the setting of the football press conference, and obviously there are videos, with the rise of YouTube and things. So obviously the importance there of subtitling, and this in some cases also involves working with actual specific subtitling software. So there's another set of skills involved there, which is once again just another string to your bow, as it were. And in this case, I've actually been able to one of my existing clients, I was able to approach them once I had the skills for the subtitling, and that's now something I'm actually doing with another client. So I mean, it's all useful in sort of building up your professional profile, really. And yeah, just echoing some of the other things that the other panelists have mentioned about proofreading. Proofreading is also quite a big part of my work, and particularly proofreading texts that are written by non-natives. So perhaps not necessarily the standard sort of proofreading in the world of translation, whereby you'd be proofreading a text that has been translated. This may be sort of, I suppose, proofreading or really revising text. So I've done this sort of both in the world of football and also academic texts as well that were written by non-native English speakers. Yeah.
Perfect. Many thanks. I think I was way too ambitious when I was suggesting to take 2 questions to finish. But this is super interesting. All the information that you have provided, I'm sure, will be very useful to all the attendees. Just to say that some of you are in LinkedIn and Twitter, so I'm sure that you will be available to follow up this discussion on social media. Social media is actually one of the platforms, the main platforms where I found you. So it's interesting for the attendees also to become engaged in this conversation. So feel free to continue the discussion on social media. thank you for participating today. We really appreciate it. I think there are many takes away from here. Some of the conversations, some of the questions we didn't manage to address, or we addressed in a different order. So the recording will be made available after today, and it will be available for free. So we will post it online. So feel free to come back, continue a conversation, email us, and just on your screen, you have information about the upcoming talks. We will continue the series this week. So just feel free to sign up. All the events are free, so welcome. You're more than welcome to join us. And I don't know, is there anything you would like to say to just wrap up today? Any final recommendation for the speakers? Yes, Naomi?
I just want to say I've seen a lot of questions in the chat that weren't answered today. So if anybody has that burning question that they really want answered, I'm very happy to take messages on LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can also email me. Absolutely no problem at all. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Ronan, do you want to add something?
No, I just echo really what Naomi said. That yeah, people feel free to send any messages over on LinkedIn or the various platforms. Really, yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Rekha, were you going to add anything?
I was going to say what Naomi and Ronan have said, and I've put my contact details for LinkedIn, Twitter, and my email address. So please feel free to contact me. And good luck to everybody who's doing their studies and starting out their career.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And absolutely. Sarah?
Yeah, same here. Everyone can feel free to contact me. And also just to say, it may seem intimidating starting out, but you really don't have to have it all figured out, and there's lots of help out there. And I found everyone in the translation profession to be really super friendly. It's taken me by surprise how friendly everyone is. So please do feel free to connect and ask for that advice and help, and I'm sure that it will be forthcoming. So good luck.
Great.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Thank you to all the attendees who joined today. See you next week, and have a fantastic career.
Thanks. Good luck, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Yes, thank you. Bye.